Welcome to the Value Script, the podcast where we bring value every episode for the everyday person. We are your hosts, Lonnie and Meredith Carmichael, and today we are grateful to continue with our awesome guest, our awesome
new
guest.
host.
New host is taking over, Ryan Wade.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show again, Ryan.
Thank you.
As we discussed last time, Ryan is a certified trauma therapist. He is trained in EMDR, he's trained in hypnotherapy, he's trained in a lot of stuff. So if you got issues, he can probably help you.
And we all got some issues.
Fingers crossed. We'll see.
We were just talking off camera about helping your kids become healthy adults. Mm-hmm. And Meredith had an experience with our 8-year-old the other day when she was like, she just decided she wanted to be upset, you know?
Yeah.
And she
didn't want to get ready for school. She was tired. She was just very emotional. But you taught us tools that I was like, hey, Paisley.
I know. That was so cool.
This is what
I know.
we can do.
Yeah.
She was trying to get her to do some heart breathing and some tapping. And she's like, she didn't want to.
Right.
She didn't want to at all. But she finally calmed down enough to do it. And it works. So,
right?
Yeah.
How important is that to start teaching your kids skills like this?
Oh man, it's everything, you know? And we were talking off camera how my siblings and I decided, right, that all the kids being born, let's make them independent, healthy adults. And that is, you know, when you can teach them these things right off the bat, man, they're processing through everything, you know, even when they don't have the emotional intelligence. I mean, their frontal lobes don't develop until sometimes even 16, 20 years old, somewhere in there. So they physiologically cannot make good logical choices, you know, and we as adults expect them to do so. Well, no, it's not going to happen. So as adults, you know, you have to sit them down and say, okay, here's what happened. How did you feel about that? You know, what are you going to change? And that's really the most beneficial way, is to kind of put the ball back into their court and show them, hey, look, you do actually have those skills inside, but we're just going to bring those out, you know?
Which is so much better than like, why are you doing that?
Right.
Stop throwing a tantrum.
Right.
Stop hitting your siblings.
Right.
Stop, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
better.
But if they can cope and deal with it themselves, then you as parents, I mean, how amazing is that? You know, you can trust that they're going to actually be able to get through life's hard pitfalls, you know? And, you know, so it gives you a sense of security, right?
Absolutely. You know, I've actually heard too, one of the worst things you can do is blame your child for the emotion they made you feel. So like, why are you always such a mess maker? Or why are you always so loud? Or why are you always so noisy? Or, you know, because that becomes their internal dialogue. I'm messy. I'm noisy. Right. I'm annoying. I'm obnoxious.
Right. And you know, it becomes their internal dialogue because they take everything as truth. You know, so
especially when it comes from a parent, maybe.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Wow. So I mean, and that's the thing, is that we want our bonds with our parents, our caregivers. Of course we do. So if our caregivers tell us, if we think or feel something, if there's a truth about us that our caregiver says, that's not correct, that's not how we do things, you know, then that's not how we're going to do things. Now, all of a sudden, the way that I really think and feel is not acceptable. So I'm going to choose my relationship with my caregiver. I have to, right? I'm dependent on them. And so that's when we start to wear masks and not really tell our full truths. We can't be vulnerable, right? Because we've been told it's not acceptable.
Not okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, and that's really the sad part, I think, and why people are hurting so much, is because they're just not really being authentic. They're not being themselves.
Well,
or they don't know who that is.
I was going to say,
right?
in my case, it's one, who am I?
Right.
Like, get to know yourself. Like, I was totally out of touch with that. Right. And then the other thing is being able to be vulnerable enough to be like, okay, feel safe enough to be able to, like, this is my problem, right? And not have the internal shame and guilt stop, or even, I wouldn't even want to think about it because of the shame and the guilt. So I wouldn't even deal with what I knew I needed to deal with, because I didn't want to go through the pain of feeling that. Yeah. But I realized that's so much more painful than actually getting to a safe place and being able to go through this with somebody that's like, somebody that can help you like you.
But why would you say that? I mean, and I want your opinion on this, because why would you say that it's maybe hard to face those things or be accountable? Because a lot of people can't be accountable for their stuff, right? I mean, that's the real deal right there.
I think because you don't give yourself permission to be okay with who you are.
Right.
And from whatever internal programming, whether it was, from your cultures, church, whatever, you're just taught that if you act a certain way, you're bad. You do this, bad, right? Versus I did this, it's information. Now, did I like the outcome? No. But do I need to judge myself?
Right.
No. I need to be gracious with myself and allow myself to work through this. There's a reason I messed up that way.
Right.
There's a reason I took that substance, or there's a reason I got in that horrible relationship. It's not that I am inherently broken. It's I need to take that information for, okay, how did I get here? And then give yourself permission to go forward and feel good about yourself, rather than, I think, man, most of my life, I felt an obligation to feel guilty when I did something that wasn't right.
Right. Yeah.
And that obligation, it didn't help.
Well, it just makes you feel shame, and you're stuck in the shame, and you're just thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I making these decisions? Why am I acting this way? And you don't ever...
Why can't I be a better husband?
Yeah.
And that's where it goes sour, right? Because, excuse me, guilt's really more of a motivator. Like it really can be a good thing to motivate us to do better, because guilt is, I don't like that outcome, right? So I want to do better. But the issue is when the shame comes in, and and now we can't be vulnerable because that shame tells us that we're unworthy. It tells us that we're unloved. It tells us all of those, nasty things about ourselves that we believe based upon our upbringing, So how can we do better if we think we're worthless? I mean, 9 times out of 10, when people come into session, it's about their worthiness. It's about what they feel about themselves. So if I really loved myself, I'm going to make those changes. I'm not going to fear change. I'm going to be okay with accountability, right? We're not able to be accountable because, well, one, we don't really know what to do to overcome stuff or to make that change, and this is familiar, I mean, somebody comes in and they're in depression all the time, but yet won't make the steps to overcome that, because even though it's miserable, being in depression is what's familiar and comfortable.
Yes.
Because our system doesn't like change. Remember that.
I was gonna say, why do we allow ourselves to stay stuck? It's because it's comfortable.
Right.
You know?
It totally is. And again, change is really scary. So we make it as painless as possible, so we can say, hey, look, it's really okay to take accountability for what you did, because actually that's empowering. And we just don't judge that anymore. It's not shame on you for being an alcoholic anymore.
Right.
It can't be, It really can't be.
So that just helps you stay stuck.
It does. It's the label, it's the label. And how is anyone going to do any good, like I said, when they think that they're not worthy?
Well, especially if you wake up every day and you tell yourself you're an alcoholic. You're always going to be an alcoholic. Well, then you will.
Right.
And I know I want to be careful with that, because that's a big tenet of one of the major help programs.
Right.
And that's one of the things I don't like about that particular program, but it works for people, and for people that it's worked for. That's just however you get sober is great.
I don't like the labels, but I also understand, the good, right, that has done. And everybody is wherever they are in their journey, and what works for one doesn't work for another.
And I think it's being honest about your vulnerability is really what that statement's about. Being honest with, this is a potential weakness I could always fall back into very easily. Right. But if I love myself enough, I want the outcomes that are good for me. Then I'm no longer going to have to numb myself out. Yeah. Nor will I want to anymore.
Right. Well, and I was thinking, that's actually a really good segue into what you were talking about the fight, right?
Yeah.
Because what is good for you guys in your healing and in your relationship is not necessarily good for me or good for anyone else, or so that's part of the reason that it's so important to do what we did during that session.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So a couple weeks ago, I'm just going to be a little vulnerable here. Meredith and I had a really epic fight on a Monday. It was terrible. And
sounds like a Monday.
it was terrible. It was,
bad.
I said something that made her feel a certain way. And she said something back that I didn't like, and I just left. I was like, well, if that's how we're going to play, I need to get out of this environment before I, start throwing nuclear bombs around and make it really, really bad. And so then while I was out, I texted Ryan. I was like, hey, I need help. We just had an epic fight. It didn't go well. And I realized most of it was my fault. And I needed to come in and work through some things. That's why we had the fight. It was because I still needed to work through stuff. And so we came in, and Ryan says, come in Friday. I got a spot. So we come in Friday, and I'm expecting him to be like, okay, what'd you guys fight about?
What happened?
What happened? And like, let's talk about it. He didn't do that at all, but you
threw a curveball.
Yeah, it was totally unexpected. You helped us understand kind of a background for what you were going to lead us through, and then you led us through a meditation session. Essentially, would you call it a meditation session? But we were, we're in your office. We closed it. We're sitting next to each other. You got us to close our eyes. We started doing heart focused breathing. And then we actually started tapping, we were sitting there, we were going back and forth, tapping,
Yep.
And then we were thinking about our safe place. And then
all evidence and research as to why this is working. Yeah.
Right. To get to that coherence. Right. And once we got into a coherent state, then you asked, was there anything that really upsetting was there a particular upsetting emotion that you've had recently? Something to that effect.
Yeah. Think about something that really upset you recently. Like, what was that moment? Think about it and what it was that made you so upset.
So I went straight to thinking about our fight.
Me too.
I think you did too. Right?
Yep. Here's the moment.
Top of the list.
Right.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, I felt this release. Gosh, that's made me emotional.
It's amazing.
Like, I felt this release, and I all of a sudden had total empathy for my wife. And I understood why she said what she said to me that made me so mad.
Yeah.
And I had empathy for that. Like, I was okay with it. Like, I got it. Like, I probably would have said that too. I realized, and it was so healing. Like, you taught us skills that we could use outside your office.
Right.
And you didn't solve our problem for us. You helped us learn how to work through that together. And that was so valuable for us.
So valuable. So valuable. And then I used those techniques with Paisley when she was having a hard time. But those skills help you because, like we were saying, there's going to be more fights.
God, we're going to mess up all the time.
There's going to be more problems that you need to work through. But I really want to, I would love to have you talk about each of those things, the heart breathing and the tapping, like specifically what those are, because that helps you get your power back when you're having a hard time.
Well, and Sue, talk about why they work, because they still, on the surface, they sound not hokey, but just, okay, I got this major, I'm all keyed up in my brain, totally dysregulated, and I'm going to go sit in a corner and breathe and it's going to work. Right.
And the tapping, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to feel better.
I never would have believed that.
I know, never. But it's a completely different way of thinking, and it's nothing that we were really taught to apply, growing up. We have a similar background, of course, growing up in the same community, and it's just funny because we, again, we're hardwired for that risk assessment, so to be preventative and say, okay, let's take this whole different approach, right? It seems very scary. And, because it's different. It's different from what our system says works. But I think what's important is that the reason, of course, that we don't go into, that I don't really go into your fight is because it is in fact your fight. And it is in fact your perspective and your learning and your growth and your progression. How can I tell you what it is that you need, you know? And so it's more important for me, crucial, in fact, to give you the skills so that you can do that for yourself, you know? And it's important for me to arm you so that I can work myself out of a job. It should not be a dependent, you know, kind of relationship for years and years and years where you guys have to come to me every single week. You know, it's supposed to make you stronger and make your family function better.
That's one thing I love. I don't know. I've never heard a therapist say that. We've had great therapists, but I've never heard them say, my job here is to work myself out of a job, to get me to where you don't need me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel like in therapy, and you can probably speak to this way more accurately than I can, but it seems like it's almost like certain medical models where they want you, the recurring business, they want you to come back because it pays their bills.
Right.
I mean, they want you to get better too.
Absolutely.
It's not necessarily malicious, but I appreciate the approach.
Well, it's kind of, it's a little bit selfless, I think, to say as a therapist. I mean, I've even looked at this, right? Looking at a client as, oh, I'm really excited about their healing today, or I'm really excited about accepting that payment. Really? Right? You know, so if my focus as a therapist is, man, I can't wait to have this amazing session, you know, the money comes after. I mean, that's because they're the importance, you know?
Right.
And so I think that's what happens. It's just about being human too, you know?
Well, and there's the mindset of like, I can help this person. I really can. Like as a therapist, like you have the tools, I can help you. Mm-hmm. But then there's the difference of, let me teach you how to help yourself.
Well, right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Teaching you to fish, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's that whole concept. And they're so much more powerful in the outside world. And we need that. I mean, as we said, right? People are just upset. And I think, you know, ever since quarantine and all of that, you know, and our gyms were taken away and our restaurants were taken away and all those outside sources that we would use as coping skills. Now, all of a sudden, here we are stuck at home. We got to figure out how to deal with this now.
And how to coexist in that new kind of ecosystem that we have.
And big surprise, there's a lot of divorces, you know, during that time period, because now all of a sudden I'm stuck with this person that, oh, I don't even really care for them, maybe, or we don't have a good relationship.
Maybe you don't know them.
Or know them even. Yeah, because I have looked to outside sources, you know, to make that all okay. And so after all of this is when I realized, oh wow, people aren't really happy. Yeah. So we need to figure out how to make that happen.
I think there was something like a 400% increase in SSRIs and depression medication.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah, really. I mean, it was.
Well, there was like a 30% increase in suicides.
Yeah. Well, you took away social interaction. You took away coping skills. You took. I mean, masks. I mean, that's, you know, now I can't read people's emotional expressions on their face. I mean, that's a part of connection. Yeah. You know, and then
a smile. I mean, you know, in my industry. A smile matters.
Yeah,
you know?
It really does.
Have you seen that one meme where the guy's missing the eyebrow but he's also missing the front tooth?
No.
And it says, you know, basically like, you know, dentistry or oral health is important because even though this guy's missing an eyebrow, you couldn't see that because you were focused on his tooth. Right? Well, it just shows you like how important a smile is. That's one of the first places you look at a person is their teeth. And if you take that away, like you say, that's a major social, you miss a lot of cues.
Yeah. I remember going to the grocery store, like once they finally removed the mask mandate, and it's like, gosh, it's nice to see people smile at you. I know. See strangers walking through the aisles.
Well, and then, you know, social media too, because that's all we had to rely on. And the fact of the matter is, because I see a lot of kids, we have to talk about how a social media interaction is not a real friendship. It's not an organic friendship because kids don't actually understand that, you know. It's the age that we're living in. So, but that took all of that social engagement away. So no wonder we were struggling, you know?
Well, hey, don't worry. I just saw last night the CDC is warning that there is a new very contagious virus.
I'm sure there is.
Yes.
I know, right? Yeah, I was like, of course they are.
I'm going to continue to live my life.
But I hope it doesn't get, you know,
that's all I can do.
I hope we don't go back in time 2 years.
I'll take the information and then just do the best I can.
Right.
Was it on the train in Palestine?
Yeah, they burned it.
Probably.
Oh man, what a mess. A couple things I want to talk about. One, I think we've had a little bit, but normalizing therapy, normalizing that you're not an outcast if you need to see a mental health professional. And in fact, normalizing to the point where it's it's easy to find. Well, it's easy to find, but a lot of successful people find coaches for mentoring their business in particular, or coaches for different things that are physical, like a personal trainer. But it's not normal to have a mental coach, at least from what I've seen. Why is that?
I think it's just because, we've come a long way, but there really was that stigma. I remember working at a medical clinic. I was like 17 to 22, somewhere in there. And we had a mental health wing, and getting a referral there, everyone would talk about, oh, they're crazy, it's really too bad. But we were told growing up, you keep your stuff to yourself, don't let anybody know. And I get that, you don't want to air your dirty laundry. You really don't. But you definitely don't want to hide anything. You definitely don't want to, because as we suppress and hide, well, one, we're not dealing with it, but two, we think that it's shameful, right?
Well, you don't want to turn your friend into your emotional dumpster.
No.
That's not fair to them.
No.
Or your partner.
Not at all.
But at the same time, you need a safe person to be able to talk to.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that is with your partner or significant other, or and sometimes it's with a physician, but usually not enough times. And a lot of times they aren't necessarily trained. They're very trained in their specialty, but they're not necessarily trained in mental health and how to do this.
That you need to be able to do that. Yeah.
Well, I have a really good friend started a nonprofit, and we've been doing some events. But what I loved about it is that it's minority groups, and and he was saying these people are getting up in front of a group, and they're talking about their stuff, and they're crying, and they're broken down, and he's like, but I didn't see that these organizations really gave us the tools to here's how you pick yourself back up, right? And rebuild yourself. And so that was why he did what he did. Pretty phenomenal. And so, that's where it's really, really important to have these skills and these techniques shown to you. So it's like, okay, now every time, you're down and out or on the floor or whatever, you're powerful enough to actually have something to do. You don't have to resort to the drinking or the drugs or the, sex or, whatever it is that you thought fulfilled you, before. And let's go into the coping skills, right? Because you were wanting to talk about why those actually work. So when we have a trauma, it's so fascinating to me because research now shows us that when we have a trauma happen to us, and a trauma, by the way, is just something happened to change my perspective on an environment, person, place, thing. So it impacted me in a negative way, to where I looked at it in a negative way. So that means that things went into fear brain, instead of logic brain.
So in your survival sense, your brain's trying to, again, scan for threats. And then the trigger is what tells you, hey, this is ready to work.
Well, and, I work so much with kids that I have these little kind of analogies, but I talk about when you first started crossing the street, what do? You look both ways, right? Well, I found traumas that way too, because once it happens, then our system says, here's how it's always going to happen. And then we'll put into place all of these survival skills, coping skills, so it thinks, like the panic attack, right? Get you out of danger, but it's not the best choice, So we have those in place. And so I love, because when we look both ways, we start to see, oh, wait a minute, though, this environment, although it used to be unsafe, now it's not unsafe. It really is okay. So I just need to start dealing with the body expressions, So you've got the body that's affected by this trauma too. All the sensations of, oh, my stomach is sick or, because of these things. So you have to address the feelings of the heart. That's very separate. And the neurons have that information of that trauma. The brain has that information of the trauma. The nervous system has that. And by the way, the nervous system and the digestive system are so connected that if one's off, the other's off. It'll affect the other. And so, yeah, if my nerves are shot, right, so is my digestive, just look out for that. So, but if you know that, okay, now I know what to do, right? I know where to start. I know what to start or how to start implementing change for that. So we come up with these coping skills because once that trauma happens, now you have to address it kind of everywhere, That's why you have to do body work, because now those emotions are depositing in different places, right? I've seen on the table somebody who has fibromyalgia, which is typically like an overload of the nervous system. They can't deal with stuff because they're just so overloaded, right? So I've seen if you apply too much pressure, that is unsafe for them. Their entire body goes in towards the spine because that's a protective stance, right? The muscles become tight because that's armor. So if we arm ourselves with better ways of being safe, then our body doesn't have to respond in those ways either. Isn't that cool though? I mean, I love that. And so like I can go do some talk therapy and I'll work it out in my brain and, bring in the logic and here's what happened. But if I don't address it in the heart, I've still got some pretty gnarly emotions there. So I can deal with it here in the thoughts, but if I start to put feeling to it, ooh, that's bad. I can't go there, So you do have to process it in all the different ways. And so the techniques that you're talking about, the first one is heart-focused breathing. So that's going to be the emotions of the heart, right? And getting that heart at that rhythmic pace, which is really the healing, optimal for healing for the body. Bring in all the oxygen, all of that. We're going to... and then the breathing also, it sends that information, as we said, through the vagus nerve. So now we can start dealing with it in the mind. Anchoring is a safe stance. So when we have something that puts us into fear brain, we need to now bring it back into logic. Okay. So if I have a fight with somebody, right, then maybe I'm going to associate, well, I had the fight on the phone. So now every time I see a text from them, I get sick to my stomach, That's all of that is in fear brain because our system is saying, hey, remember when that happened? So you need to watch out for this. But we have to look both ways before we cross the street. And that's me looking at the text going, oh, well, even though I'm sick, I love this person. This person loves me. We've been friends forever, right? So you're kind of just looking at all of the logic behind why being sick is not really an appropriate response there. But that means now I have to put it into logic brain. So heart-focused breathing will do that as well, right? But anchoring does that more than anything because it's a safe stance. So anything where you can make yourself feel safe or make the system feel safe is going to do that. So that really helps there. And then part of that is, and they call this the butterfly hug because it is like a butterfly and flapping your wings, but anything processing. So it's a back and forth movement that's going to nail your nervous system. That's going to help.
What I love too is when you talked about how our bodies are like subconsciously, we will do that. Like when people pace, back and forth, that's
when
your
you're brain. On the phone, right?
That's
you're
like
gonna pace.
You're trying to process and all of that without even realizing what you're doing.
You're right.
Yeah.
And it's important to have these tools like throughout the day because, part of sleeping and going into REM sleep, this is why sleep is so important, is because REM sleep is all of that, right? REM sleep is our system processing everything that happened throughout the day, filing it into long term. So if we don't get good sleep, then guess what? We don't get good processing, So
thank you for joining us for another episode of The Value Script. We hope you enjoyed our guest, Ryan Wade. We will be continuing this episode in part 3. So stay tuned. Don't forget to clickety-click, like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to share this with your friends and family. You may find this to be a valuable episode for them to see. And we'll see you next time on The Value Script.